Manx Radio's 1 to 3, tended by Ramsey Garden Centre. Pick up your new all-season loyalty card in-store today and start collecting reward points.
Well, that's In Sync and Justin Timberlake. I think I whistle better than them, don't you, Howard?
Beautiful whistling, that top-notch whistling. You're a souffleur.
I'm a souffle.
Souffleur. A whistler.
Is that the word for whistler?
I think that's the correct phrase for a whistler, isn't it? A souffleur.
I had no idea. You've got a lot of words in your brain. Speaking of, I tried to write you a poem. So I have an issue. If ever I'm kind of like, you're messing about with your mates and you're kind of coming up with like silly song lyrics and things, and I can never do the last line. So similarly, I've tried to write you a poem, but I can't really do a last line. They're all a bit rubbish. However, here we go. It's not a poem, it's a limerick, actually, if that's sort of a poem. There was a young Howard called Caine, with billions of words in his brain. He'd link them together, some funny, some clever, but none of them ever the same.
That's very good.
Rubbish.
Well,
not one of his poems was lame. No, it's a bit rubbish.
I do think you're right. I do think it's sometimes the end line, because a poem's always got to have a bit of a story, doesn't it? And like most of them, I mean, if some can end in the middle, but most of them you think there's going to be a beginning to hook you in, and then a bit of a narrative or some sort of storyline, and then an end point at the end, which will have either a punchline or some sort of clear end point to it. And that's the hardest part, isn't it?
It is.
Certainly, I think if I'm doing anything, sometimes the starting idea sometimes just comes into your head like that, doesn't it? Just whatever. Sometimes you see something, or you think of something, or you think you want to write about something, and you get a start line, and then if you sit with it and play with it for a while, you can start to progress it a bit. But then you sometimes, and again, I don't know, I'm sure everyone who does poetry will have a different way of thinking of it. And so some people probably work backwards, have an end point and go back to the beginning. But I usually get to the middle and think, yeah, well, this is fine, but how on earth am I going to end it?
How often do you write poetry then?
Whenever. I'm not. I mean, there are some wonderful poets on the island, as you know, and some of them, I mean, Annie Keswick, who's a regular here, and former Manx Bard, and the current Manx Bard, Boxey, I'm sure they are at it every day, if you know what I mean. That they will be writing, and I know Annie definitely writes every day, and I think Boxey, and we were chatting to her on Spotlight, and she was saying, I'll be doing more. And this is the fascinating thing with poetry, I think, with so many of the poets on the island, when you speak to them. And some are very serious, some are very comic, some are writing about the island's geography and culture, and others are writing very much from within and from sort of inner demons and such like, and using it as a cathartic sort of expression of themselves in many ways. But I do think you find, if you're writing just for your own amusement, it's one thing. If you're writing, as you do, of course, if you're the bard, you get commissions and you get lots of them. I think, can you write a poem for this? And so you are given a topic that you might never have felt inspired to write about before, and you're expected then to come up with something which you can perform to people. And that's it. You're not just writing it, of course, you're going to perform it.
I have to say, though, I'm amazed by you, because I will often say to you at like 11 o'clock, I might say, can you write me a poem for the show? And you'll have done it within 15 minutes, and it could be on absolutely anything. And I think, have you written one for today as well?
I have done one for today, yeah.
And if I'm doing
something quickly, I'll do it in sort of doggerel style, because that's usually the sort of easiest way to do it, isn't it? Rather than trying to do something too clever, where you might have to think about a bit more. But if you think about something which is just going to be fairly rhythmic and sort of,
I always go for a limerick.
Then it'll sort of usually flow fairly quickly. Then
I've just been slightly distracted because David H has just been in touch. I was about to ask you which poets you like, and David H has just said, I like the Jewish poet Rabbi Burns.
Yay!
Very good. Who do you like poet-wise then?
Well, I must admit, I sort of like little bits and pieces here and there. I always have quite liked John Cooper Clarke. Love John Cooper Clarke. Health Fanatic.
He's very good.
Yeah. Do you know Health Fanatic? That was always...
I probably do.
That's a goodie.
Can you recite any of it?
I can.
Be careful. It's John Cooper Clarke.
Only because I've got it on my phone a bit.
Go on. Give us a little bit of it.
I keep meaning to learn it, but I never do. Around the block, against the clock, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tick-tock, running out of breath, running out of socks, running on the road, flippity-flop, non-skid agility, chop-chop, no time to hang about, work out, phonetic, work out. The crack of dawn, he's lifting weights, his telltale heart reverberates, he's high in polyunsaturates, low in polysaturates. The Duke of Edinburgh's award awaits, it's a man's life, he's a health fanatic. So was his wife.
That's absolutely brilliant.
He's
I
great,
love
isn't
him.
he? Yeah.
And it is the delivery as well, isn't it? I do like John
He's still
Higley.
going, still going strong.
Oh, yeah. Quite
John
often hear
Higley's
him.
classic as well, isn't he?
John Higley's brilliant. He has written a poem which is called What a Poem's Not. I'll give you a couple of lines from it because it's quite long. But a poem is not an ant, but it can be quite short. A poem's not a banana, but there may be something under its skin. A poem is not a coat, but it may have some warmth in it. A poem is not a dog, but it might be quite a friend. And it goes on like this, and it's very, very entertaining. And then at the end, it just ends up with, a poem is not a wig, but maybe it will change you. A poem is not an X-ray, make no bones about it. A poem is not a year-old bag of vegetables, but it can smell quite strongly. A poem is not a xylophone, spelled with a Z, and it can spell words wrongly.
Marvellous.
Which is very good.
Marvellous.
So we do like a bit of John
Well,
Higley.
getting back to what you were saying before, just looking at that health fanatic one, you see again, it goes on for several verses, but it's got a classic ending to that. So we'll just give you the last verse. No, I was just thinking about what you were saying that. So you're thinking health fanatic, of course, is what it's called. And you get to the last verse, it's all about, obviously, the health fanatic, what they're doing. And then he ends up saying, and again, just a great ending, shadow boxing, punch the wall, one-a-side football, what's the score? 1-1, could have been a copper, too small, could have been a jockey, too tall, knees up, head the ball, nervous energy makes him tick, he's a health fanatic, he makes you sick. It's great, isn't it?
It's just great. Coming from John Cooper Clarke.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. Can't go wrong.
It's just ace, I love him.
And who was the other poet you used to like, you really loved as well? Canadian? No, not Canadian, there was someone else.
Oh, I can't remember.
That was something about a cat, I remember one time you were...
Off the top of my head, I honestly can't remember. I love Roald Dahl as well. His revolting rhymes were my favourite as a kid. We've had someone who's written a poem for us, so I should really read this before we get to yours. By the way, if you just tuned in, it's World Poetry Day, which is why we're talking poetry and why Howard's here, just because we like chatting with him as well. So we've had this in from Mr. NT. When a poem you need at short notice, on the wind and the rain you should focus. You'll get plenty of use from verses induced from bad weather that's frequently honest.
Top work.
I love the fact that they're just not quite rhymes as well. What is it you call those? The sort of slight, sort of almost rhyming.
Or like alliteration or something like that.
No, so like instead of rhyming absolutely, like notice and focus kind of thing.
Yes.
There's a term for it and I can't remember what it is. There is a term for it, isn't
it? Assonance?
Is it assonance,
yeah.
maybe? Anyway, it's very good. Yeah, it's good us talking about poetry. We know what we're talking about, don't we?
Well, you know what? This is the whole thing with poetry, isn't it? And that people go, obviously, to universities and study poetry and I've never done that. I was hopeless at English literature at school. And you have poets over here, I'm sure, who have done English literature at university level. And equally, there are plenty of poets over here, and this is what Boaksy, the current, I know, Manx Bard, is keen to promote, and that, yes, she's very well educated and has been a teacher herself and such like, but it's a case of, poetry should be for all, and that you can have very highly educated poets, and if you want to go into it, it can be very technical and thinking about the different rhyming meters, etc., 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 or... You know what? You can just put pen to paper and write something from the heart or from the head and make a poem. I think it is something which is open to all at whatever level you want to go in.
And it keeps those little grey cells firing, which is a good thing. Well, you've done that for us. You've written something for us. So would you please, resident Manx radio poet, former Slam champion Howard Caine...
Current.
Sorry! I stripped you of your title in public and everything. I forgot you're the current Slam champion.
Yes.
Oh, wasn't that long ago, was it, either?
No.
My word.
I've lost track now. A few weeks back now.
I am delighted to welcome into the studio the current Slam champion. We like to call him the Slampion. It is Mr. Howard Caine. I'm sorry, I forgot. I totally forgot.
We'll let you off.
Oh, blame me old age. So we've got a champion in the studio and he's going to recite a poem he's written especially for us. We're very lucky.
Don't get too excited. As I said, anything done quickly is always going to be in a bit of doggerel. However, I thought I'd try and keep it seasonal. And obviously we're into October, and October only means one thing, doesn't it?
On the Isle of Man?
Yeah.
Hopchinae.
Correct. So it's got
very good.
It's heading in that direction, and it's sort of veggie based. It's called Light Up My Life.
Okay, I'm going to take the music out, so it's just Howard and a microphone.
It is Manxy. Okay. There once was a turnip, as Manx as could be, who wanted a life as a different veggie. He felt being turnip was quite second rate, and unlike his friends, he'd never be ate. His friends were all carrots and tanned as a trump, whereas he was all whitish and roundish and plump. Beanie friends worked out as their egos soared. Some were keen runners, while others were broad. His green friends were better, and one was a hero, so green he was black, a Cavalo Nero. The spud in his jacket was often seen later, clothes often smashed, a real commentator. The chard was called the Ruby, a right little miss, a sleek, shiny body with green hair and Swiss. The collie was hardest, all snowy white curds. Sweet parsnip was tender, and didn't butter words. Others were better and more like his moots, especially those with unusual roots. Celeriac, salsify, artichokes, leek, radishes so fast that they're never beat. But turnip had nothing. His life was a battle. The best that it offered, being eaten by cattle. He'd ruminate somewhat, and oh, how he'd plead, "I don't want to be patted, I'd rather be Swede." But salvation was looming one late autumn day. For turnip folk everywhere, it's hop tunay. Uprooted and transported southwards past Santon, then on to Cregnish. And now he's a lantern.
Howard! That's got. Can that be our new national anthem poet? Poem. I love that. Oh, Howard, that was brilliant.
Oh, well, thank
that
you
was
very much.
absolutely brilliant. No wonder you're a Slampion.
Slampion. I'll keep that phrase.
Slampion Howard Caine. As ever, thank you so much. If you would like to share your poetry with us, we'd love to hear from you. 166 177. It just so happens I have Blossoms up next. The song is called The Sulking Poet. You're not sulking.
I try not to.
You try not to. He's occasionally grumpy, but he's not
Grumpy
sulking.
often. Sulking
Yeah.
not quite as often.
Happy World Poetry Day.
And to you.
Manx Radio's 1 to 3, tended by Ramsey Garden Centre. Pick up your new all-season loyalty card in-store today and start collecting reward points.